What is up, ZBrushers? Welcome back to Z Fever. My name is Ricky, and today we're going to be talking about how to use ZBrush to get a comic book sort of an effect on a character or scene or an object that you have created and you want to display in a bit of a different light, right? So let's hop to it. Okay, so if you're going to be following along with this, you're going to want something to work with. You can grab something out of the Lightbox, if you will, or if you have another project, then go for it. We're not going to really be doing any sculpture, but we're going to be talking about materials and how we can use different materials to create an effect, right? And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using some materials, doing some renders, and then we're going to take those renders over into Photoshop, and then we're kind of going to composite them to make them look pretty much the way that we want to. Now, ideally, I would have maybe a posed character or something like that. I haven't gotten that far with this guy, but you know, this will be enough to be able to demonstrate what exactly we're going for. All right, so let me shut up about that and let's get to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this material palette and I'm just going to dock it over into this tray over here, and we're going to be working with a handful of materials to give us some different desired effects. Something else that I want to do, maybe not, no, because I'm going to render these out, and they're going to have an alpha out background, so I don't need to mess around with this background. Okay, so basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some standard materials, and then I'm also going to use some other materials that I've found. And I will include a link to our group, and in there you will have access once you join to collect these materials if you choose to check them out and put them to work for yourself, right? So we're going to be using a series of sketch shades. We're probably going to use some framer, maybe some metallic stuff. It just depends on where I feel like going with this. That looks kind of cool. But then I'm also going to talk about some comic book shading materials that I've picked up along the way. So, you know, if I switch over to this, you'll see I get this really cool effect on this flag. You know, and these are things that can all be modified, adjusted to our liking. So if I wanted to, I could turn around and say apply this material to that right there. Now that's not exactly the effect that I want on this guy, but you know, to each his own, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this modifier drop down right here. And this is pretty much where the majority of our work is going to take place. And so what we want to do is we kind of want to stick with a material. So I'm going to go with this sketch shade 3. And I could probably even go with a skin shade 4 if I wanted to, but I'm just going to stick with this. So I'm going to say I'm going to fill this object, right? And the reason I want to do this is I want to work on one piece, and then we'll apply that that effect to the rest of the pieces that I want to apply this to. So what I'm going to look at here is I want to, actually it's not the modifiers, it's the mixer that I want to be working with. Okay, so underneath the mixer there are some options here. You can add some posterization, you can add an outline, you can change the depth of that outline. So let's have a look at this. I'm going to crank up this posterization to about 4 or 5, right? And you're going to see that things change up quite a bit. And if I start incorporating an outline, you'll see that, and it's applying to the flag behind us as well, you'll see that the outline is going to get darker, right? So it goes from black, it's basically an opacity sort of thing. So if I drop it down, it's not going to be so intense, but if I bring it all the way up, it's just going to be a black line, right? And then we can control the depth, right? So the lower that we go, the more of that outline the more it's going to take up, right? So if I bring it up a little more, it's going to be a lot less harsh, all right? Back out a bit so we can see. Now we might want to adjust our posterization a bit. So if we bring it up, that'll help some things out. Or if we, it just depends on what sort of an effect that you want. So, I mean, that's cool. I like that. But it just depends on what exactly it is that you're going for, right? But whatever it is, you need to stick with it, right? So let's say, I'm going to say, let's stick with something around 3. So the idea, I'm trying to chase after this old comic book style effect where the shading was not, where shading was kind of flat, right? So I think this is good. So let's stick with that. So now what I'm going to do is, now that I have this material applied, and I'm going to use a couple of other materials, but for the most part, I want to make sure that this material is going to be getting cast across everything. I'm just going to go over to Z Plugin, and I'm going to go to Subtool Master, and I'm going to go Fill, and I'm going to fill only the material, right? And you'll see it's going to go through and update everything. Boom, 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 boom. There we go. All right. And so now everything has applied just as I should expect it to, right? And so now we can go through and we can take our renders, right? So I can set, set an angle or something. Let's say that's it, right? And if I just hit Shift R on the keyboard, it's going to render this thing out for me. And I want to have a look at the shadows. The shadows are kind of fine. With something like this where it's really stylized, I might want to make a few modifications. So I'm going to go to BPR shadow. And I want to cut out the blur. I don't want there to be any blur. I'm going to bring up the raise to say 30. I don't want to have any angle on it because I want it to be pretty harsh, right? So if I change the strength, it'll change basically the opacity of the shadow. So if I go through and re-render, you'll see that this shadow here should change just a little bit. Maybe not, because that wasn't even a shadow. Let's see. Bring this light around. See if we can get it to cast. There we go. Yeah, so you'll see that back here, it's not quite a solid black, but if I bring it all the way up and do a re-render, it's you can't see through it, right? So it just kind of depends on what it is that you're going for, what sort of style that tickles your fancy, right? So we're gonna stick with this. Now I will mention that whatever angle that you choose, you need to stick with, right? So what might be good for you to do is you may want to create a timeline so that you can get back to the exact area that you want to be. But I'm just going to leave things as is because I don't think that I'm going to have a problem with that. If I do, then I'll slap myself later. So I'm going to hit, I'm going to render this, right? And I'm going to start saving some things out. All right, so whenever I go to render things out, I want to grab a few things. I want to grab the shaded. This is going to be the actual material that we applied. So I'm going to grab this. I've already saved it out once. So you're going to go through and grab that. You want to grab this mask. So I'm going to say our mask. Use whatever naming convention that you prefer. You can also grab the shadow pass. I don't really use this so much, but since we have it, why not? And we'll also grab this depth. Now, this is going to be the only time that we actually grab all of these because we're going to be reusing this mask and the depth and everything else like that. So really all we're going to be doing at this point is we're going to be going through and changing up the materials that we're going to be using. So I like to have a look at a few different things. So I'm going to change this up to our sketch shade. And I'm going to go through and basically do the same thing that we did before. I'm going to do a fill with the material, right? So see, it kind of gives me kind of a flat piece of information. So I'm going to render this one out, and then I'm just going to grab this shaded. So I'm going to go R sketch shade 1, okay. And then I'm just going to start going down the line, just grabbing a few different things. I'm going to go. All right, here I just kind of sped things up because, you know, I think it's pretty safe to say you get the point. We're going through and I'm just selecting different materials. I'm using a selection of sketch shades and framers and some comic book materials that I've picked up from various places. And all those materials are going to be available on the Sea Fever group. So if you're not sure where to find them, or you've been misled, because some of these materials are a bit older, right? And so some of the websites that they used to be at are no longer available. Even if you go through the forums over at Zbrush Central, some of those links don't really work anymore. So I managed to find quite a few of these, and so I made sure to put them up there, because otherwise they just kind of get lost, right? And I want to make sure that people have the availability, or have them available to them. So basically I've gone through, I've grabbed renders of every single one of these, and here in a moment we're going to hop over into Photoshop. Alright, so we're over here in Photoshop, and I've got all of these renders loaded up in here. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be pulling from each one of these. But I want to choose one as a base, right? So I'd like to start with our framer, because that's going to give me my tone, right? And I want this to be my base, right? It's all about that base. So let's see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through. Yeah, that's going to be my base. So I should probably rename this, but it'll be fine. So what I want to do is I want to turn this into a layer. So I'm going to double click on this, and it's now a layer. And the next thing I want to do is I want to get rid of this background right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I want to load a selection, right? So I'm going to load from our mask that we grabbed, right? And so what this is going to do is it's going to use that mask as an alpha, and the next thing I can do is just do Control X, and it's going to get rid of all of that information that I don't need, right? So now I can save that. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of fill that with say, let's just fill it with the neutral color. Grab my paint bucket, and there we go. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start grabbing these individual pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through, I'm going to run through, and I'm going to copy them. So I'm going to Control A, Control C. Then I'm going to head over to this Framer 3 and paste. Control A, Control C, and I'm going to speed this up so you don't have to feel like ripping your eyeballs out. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I've got all these loaded up, and so I need to do the same thing that I did before, and I just need to come through load selection, grab that mask, and then just do Control X, and I'm just going to run down the line. Control Shift D is going to reselect everything. Control X, Control Shift D, Control X, and I'm sure there's a faster way to do this, but whatever. There we go. Okay, so now what we want to do is we kind of want to start thinking about what precisely it is that we want to have happen with this, right? Do we want our outlines and everything up top? You know, what precisely are we doing? So I'm going to bring this up. That's our shadow. So I'm going to do a multiply on this. On this, I'm going to do, let's do an overlay, shall we? We can control the opacity. How's this looking? Okay. Soft light? No. Multiply? Hell no. Turn these others on. See how they're doing. This one I'm going to drop the opacity. I don't want it to be so harsh. Overlay. Just do normal. And really it's going to come down to what works out best, right? And you don't have to use these. If you go through and you figure out, you know, I don't like the way it's playing out, don't use it. You know. That's interesting. I don't know why, it just is. Okay, so now we've got this that is sitting underneath. I'll bring it up. Let's do an overlay with this. No way, that's blown out. Let's see, do a screen. No. Normal. Let's bring this down a bit. So I'm going to bring this back down underneath. I'm going to change this back to normal. There we go. I'm really liking that. And let's see what happens here. Let me bring this one up. Let's do a multiply. Okay, so I think this is what I want. You know, it's nothing complicated, nothing crazy. Something that I could do is let's say, let me turn this one on. How is that fair? Let's bring this down. Let's just make it normal. That's interesting. Just gonna turn that off for now. All right, so I've decided, you know, this is what I want. This is cool. I like how those highlights hit. It's interesting to me. So this is where I'm gonna go. So what I'm gonna do is let's see. I want to have a little bit of a gradient in the background. So something blue. We're gonna Maybe a little too blue. Okay. And so that's where I'm at with this. And everything's kind of composited. If you wanted to, you could come through and maybe throw like a paper texture on here if you wanted. And that would be cool, and make it multiply across everything. And that would give it a little bit of depth, make it look maybe like you drew it or something like that. Or you can come through and say duplicate a layer. So I'm going to duplicate this one, and then let's do a filter. So let's do a Gaussian blur, right? Maybe not quite so harsh. And then let's maybe nope, delete that mask. Let's maybe do a brightness contrast. Use legacy. Bring that up. Wow. Interesting. I like that. Okay. And so you can come through and you can make all these little changes, that anything that to your heart's desire on this. But at the end of the day, you can come through and pretty much do whatever you want to with this. But really all we're doing is we're compositing things together and making them function the way that we see fit. And so you see in a short amount of time, you know, yeah, we're coming up on what, 20 minutes or so. But we've taken an image, we've taken a model that we had, made some renderings, threw them into Photoshop, and made pretty much just an illustration out of it. So I can come through, crop this out, you know, what's to say this isn't the final image or something like that. And that's all we need. And this is good. This is good work. And yeah. So if you're looking to diversify the way that you want your work to look, make it you know, kind of different, right? This is a good way to go. For me, I love doing illustration work, and the great thing is that I can go through and make a model, and then I can turn around and use that character for an illustration. You know, you can call it Cheater's version of of animation if you want to, but you know, what if it's just something that you want to design for a T-shirt or something like that? Here's a way that you can do it. Okay, so I would be happy to answer any questions that happen to come along. You know, hit me up on the Facebook group, or hit me up on Twitter at ZFever with the 3, I believe. I'll leave it in the description below. But if you're new, I want you to hit that subscribe button. I want you to head over to the ZFever group and grab these materials and any of the other tools that I have on there. And definitely get involved. If you're returning, thanks again for watching, and happy ZBrushing, guys. Take care.